Chapter 509. Yiddir's eyes, as vivid as a road wetted by rain, no longer avoided the gaze that met them. You know, Yiddir, one of my goals since joining the cavalry was to be acknowledged as your closest friend. Is that so? The sentiment he just felt vanished in an instant, replaced by the notion that it was a truly peculiar aim. Gakane, catching Yiddir's expression, probed. You find it hard to understand, don't you? I was confident in my tenacity, but it still felt like a challenging goal. But hearing what you said just now made me feel even happier than achieving that, Gakane said, his usual shyness and brightness slowly returning to his expression. Seeing that Gakane looked much better than before, Yiddir simply nodded in agreement without saying a word. Gakane also refrained from adding anything more on the subject, and instead turned his head as if he had noticed something. It seems the commander has arrived. Yiddir's eyes followed immediately. The entrance area had become somewhat noisy as soon as a tall man stepped inside. Kishir, whose height made him stand out like a majestic tree amidst a meadow, drew everyone's attention as he re-entered. Whether they held him in esteem or not, everyone's eyes were on Kishir, even Kashtian Lahore. Yiddir was sharply reminded of how Kishir could commandingly capture the attention of others. Having always been by his side, seeing him from a distance was a rare experience for Yiddir. Watching him quietly, he saw Kishir turn his head and scan the surroundings for after exchanging a few words with the chief steward. His gaze stopped precisely where Yiddir was standing. Upon locking eyes, Kishir waved his hand in a grand gesture, his demeanor overtly cordial. The few remaining retainers of Duke Diarca, who had yet to leave their seats, muttered amongst themselves, their brows furrowed. However, they were now clearly in the minority. Their complaints and anger, their insults and slanders all failed to affect the evening celebration. Suddenly, Gakane spoke up. Yiddir, you mentioned that today would present an opportunity you have been waiting for. That's right, Yiddir murmured, without breaking his gaze from Kishir. Now I think I understand what you meant. Gakane grinned in a way he hadn't in a long time. He patted Yiddir's back a couple of times gently before heading back to where the other members were. Yiddir began walking toward Kishir. You have arrived. Yes, the hall has become quite clean in my absence. Kishir greeted Yiddir and whispered with a smile. Yiddir answered calmly, looking around at the seats, which had emptied by more than half after the departure of Duke Diarca and his followers. I did put in some effort in cleaning, though there is still some dust left. It should be enough for everyone to enjoy. I heard that even from where His Majesty is, my assistant is diligently cleaning. Kishir's eyes, which had been leisurely until then, changed slightly at that moment. I wanted to hurry back and help with the cleaning, but it seems the dust moved faster than I did. ... Was Kishir implying that Duke Diarca's departure ahead of his return was no coincidence? Yiddir recalled that just before Duke Diarca had announced his departure, someone had rushed over to whisper something in his ear. It was around that time that news reached him that Kishir had detached himself from the emperor's side. Even Yiddir, who was Kishir's closest aide, and the cavalry had only heard that he was going to meet Emperor Kalusa. They had not been told when he would return. Such movements of the royal family were inherently supposed to be secretive. Yet, Duke Diarca acted as if it was only natural to immediately hear such news and act upon it. This essentially meant that everything happening within the palace could directly reach his ears. Yet, Yiddir felt a chilling realization that the influence of Duke Diarca, including Crown Prince Kashtian, extended like a network of veins deep into the palace. This palace, supposedly the home of the emperor and the imperial family, was now a place where none of them could freely roam. So that's why he made the unusual excuse that he was tired and retired so early. Suppressing the uncomfortable surge of emotion, as if he'd been struck on the back of the head, Yudir quietly asked, "Did your visit to His Majesty the Emperor go well, Commander?" "It went as well as it could have," Kishore responded with an ambiguous answer. He was rather surprised that I used the relaxed rules concerning the second gender as I did. He seemed quite flustered, but he understood eventually. Still, he will probably want to see the face of my assistant once more soon. So, in other words, although it was okay to dance Altan for the first time in the history of the Imperial Palace, the fact that Kishir danced with either a man and Omega was more shocking event than expected for the Emperor and Empress. It's not like I didn't consider the possibility. Plans involving people don't always go as thought. Either knew the Diarca family's future and the nobles gathered here, but like them, even the doting emperor and empress would have paths hard to convince just by Kishir's words. Either nodded, keeping his facial expression unchanged. "I see. Understood. So, will you proceed with the next steps now, Commander?" Dealing with Duke Diarca and Emperor Kalusa didn't mean the tasks were over. Either's gaze drifted towards the steps where Kashtian Lahore sat. There stood Keol, his eyes half gone as if he couldn't endure the shocking events any longer. Now that Duke Diarca had left, the time to snag him for a conversation was perfect. Either planned to signal Keol while Kishir was busy holding the attention of Kashtian and the others. "No." "Excuse me?" "I said I have been drinking." Either's mind, spinning with the task to come, momentarily halted at the unexpected answer. He closed and opened his eyes, staring at the smiling face, looking down at him. Kishir gently leaned his head toward Either's ear, adopting a more sultry and gentle demeanor than before. To an outsider, it would seem as if Duke Paleta was simply fixing the messy hair of his assistant, but the red cloth wrapped around his arm skillfully concealed Either's presence from everyone's view. The Qualishat liquor is dangerous enough on its own. If something's been added to it, there is no need for further discussion. I have never even heard that you developed a tolerance to poison after recovering from a monster-inflicted injury. Can you explain? Either was quietly surprised at the level of detail being discussed about the events that had transpired here. It seemed that not only Duke Diarca was adept at knowing what happened within the Imperial Palace as if it were in the palm of his hand. "I once mentioned that I don't get easily intoxicated by most alcohol. Do you remember? The reason is the same." Neither made eye contact with Kishir, aiming for a brief and clear explanation. "To be precise, it's not a tolerance developed after being injured by the monster, but something I have had since my awakening. Unless it's related to my weakness, nothing makes me drunk." "I understand that Qualishat contains some elements related to that weakness." Not a trace of amusement could be seen in the vividly glowing red pupils. Kishir's keen eyes seemed to pierce through everything, making sure not to miss even a small detail in Either's words. "Yes, I'm aware. However, I judged that the amount was too small to have any effect. And indeed, it didn't, did it? I'm fine." "Your body temperature is higher than usual. Even so?" "It would only have an effect similar to being slightly tipsy. ... In the ensuing silence, the fingers that had been slowly running through Either's hair finally came to a halt. "It seems my assistant already knew about that drink." "Yes." "Did you also know that drink would be served today?" Either didn't answer, although he wasn't entirely certain it had been within the realm of his expectations. To answer clearly on this point seemed difficult, as it would start to involve details from his past life. "I thought you seemed more confident than usual." Kishir closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. Moments later, he relaxed his shoulders, reverting back to the same Duke Paleta he had always been.